Hey everyone, welcome back to the Boys in Motion podcast. I'm Brian. I'm here with Tyler. Andrew is running behind just a few minutes, so we may catch him for the latter half of this episode. We may not, but we will see. Today, we're wrapping up one of the biggest weekends in Canadian running, the Toronto Waterfront Marathon. 2025 edition was very spicy. It was a successful weekend, but also a super tough weekend for many. So whether you ran the full, the half, or just came out to cheer, this weekend had some serious energy, and we've got a ton to unpack together.
I'm excited to hear about it. And once again, you know how we do it. I didn't poke too hard on the debrief post race, so I'm waiting for you to lay it all out today on this pod. But whether you were part of the action, first timer, cheering on from afar, or even a pace bunny or spectator on Lakeshore, I think this race was fun for a lot of people, and I definitely had FOMO looking into this race from afar. So let's get into it.
Super pumped about this episode. If you did listen to last week's prep race episode, we're going to bring it full circle in this episode. We're going to talk about what actually went down, what we learned, well, myself, what I learned, how to bounce back after a marathon, because I'm in a lot of pain and I've been chatting with some of the BIM community and I know everybody's suffering. Except for Adam for some reason. He went out on a 5K and it was like a minute per kilometer faster than his marathon pace. I don't know what that's about.
What the heck?
Yeah. So lots to dive in about, and yeah, so let's get into it. What do you have to ask me, Tyler?
Yeah, let's start with, of course, the beginning here. The pre-race energy, the atmosphere. What was the race morning like? Because I know I did this last year. I'm just wondering if it was, similar. How was the weather looking like for the day? I know there was mixed feelings the week leading up to it. So just dive right into the beginning.
Yeah, so leading up the few days prior, we could tell that it was going to be warm, and it looked like it was going to be rainy. But there were a lot of shorts going on like TikTok and Instagram about people paying Etsy witches to make sure that the rain didn't hit. And you know what? Those investments paid off because it did not rain leading up to the race. There were a few wet patches, so it definitely rained a tiny bit overnight, but during the race it didn't, which was huge. But yeah, it was warm. People did not really have like throwaway clothes on. It wasn't a thing. It just wasn't cold enough. I left the hotel that I was staying at about 2 kilometers away from the start line. I left just in my BIM singlet and shorts on and my half tights. So really it was like good, like 16 degrees, a little bit windy in the morning. But it heated up, and I think a lot of people struggled with the heat, hydration, electrolytes. That was kind of the main theme about what people were complaining about during the full marathon for sure. So overall, weather was good, but I'd say it was maybe hotter than you would expect and probably would like if you were really chasing a goal time or you wanted to finish comfortably. What would you say is like the perfect race temperature?
I mean, last year when we did it was amazing, ideal, really. I think it was started out, pretty chilly. A lot of people had that throwaway clothes on, the 5-6 degrees, and I think climbed only up to about like 10. So that was kind of like our really optimal fall racing weather. And realistically is kind of what I wanted to chat a little bit about is a main reason people pick those fall marathons is to get that cooler weather, increase your odds at that PR. I guess, did you kind of know that warmer weather coming in was maybe not going to get you that ultimate A goal PR? And did you like go back on your paces a little bit, dial back, or how did you manage that?
Yeah, so I mean, I had adjusted even prior to the race from a sub 3 to a 305, which I hit. And we'll dive into my race specifically. I want to make it a little bit more general, especially given like the success that we have in the last episode. There's like so many people that listen that enjoyed that race preview. So this recap, I hope we can keep it at least like high level at the start and then we'll dive in. But I would say, yes, I knew it was going to be hotter than I'd like. And I agree with you totally. Like 5 degree start line, you're kind of shivering. You need the throwaway clothes. But by the time you get to like the 10K mark, you're hot enough where like 5 to 10 degrees just feels perfect. It wasn't that. However, it was windy enough. Now, the wind was from the south, so coming off of the lake. So, if you had a good group and you could kind of shelter yourself from the wind, it was just windy enough and there was overcast conditions. Like it was cloudy the most of the time, at least for my race. I know later in the day, maybe people finishing like closer to the 5 hour mark, they would have had maybe a bit of sun. But overall, from what I saw, it was overcast, which kept it cool enough. I don't think it really got over 20 degrees, but it was hotter than I think most would like.
And I find it was humid too, eh? Like the humidity and the dampness in the air might have been, a little bit more of a downside to the, breathing aspect of it and keeping your electrolytes in and that hydration piece. But I mean, definitely a hotter race than most people were used to.
Yeah, 100%. And I think, yeah, hotter. What I would summarize the weather as is hotter, windier, and more humid than you would like. But there were some counterbalances to that in one, the energy of the crowds, huge, like it's the biggest race in Canada, and it felt like it. So the crowd definitely brought energy. And yeah, like the wind in the way that it hit you, it was all right because it was most of the time kind of a side wind. And when you had that big wind, you could rely on other people to sort of break it or be breaking it for other people. But yeah, overall, I'd say like it was maybe like a 5 out of 10, 6 out of 10 in terms of conditions for a fall race. Of course, if this was in the summer, we'd all be, triumphing in like just how beautiful the weather was being that cool. So if you compare it to like those heat training sessions in
It's
the middle of
true.
summer when you're actually training for the race, it wasn't that bad.
Very true.
Yeah.
And I know when I'm racing, I always have, those couple signs or those cheer stations or groups that really stick to me. Can you give a nice shout out to, let's say, your most memorable sign or cheer group out there? If not, maybe top three?
Yeah, so there was definitely like your classic signs. And yeah, so like I think some of the classic signs that you're always going to see, like you run better than the government, who needs toenails, worst parade ever, like some of those were there. A few highlights. This one I saw in person, but I also saw it on Reddit, which was Chat GPT can't help you with this. I thought that's very timely given
That's a
the
good one. Yeah.
the wave of AI that we're in. And I'm trying to think some others. I don't know. I'm trying to think. There's not. Yeah, I would say like for the majority of the race, I was pretty bonked out and not reading signs, but it's just nice to know that there's so many people cheering and supporting you. Yeah. In terms of signs, I think the Chat GPT one was one that was like memorable for me.
Yeah, that's a good one. Any what do you call those? The marching bands. I always love the live bands or the marching bands out there too.
Yeah, so there were marching bands, DJs, big groups like indigenous drums, like Southeast or South Asian type of groups that were supporting. I think one of the highlights from that perspective was as you were going under the what would that be? The
Gardner.
under the expressway
Yeah.
basically. Yeah, under the Gardner, but coming up to the halfway point of the marathon and the finish of the half, there was a big group with a big DJ group, and they also had like the kind of horns that were in that like FIFA tournament in wherever it was in maybe in
Oh,
Brazil or
that's sick.
whatever. And it was just so loud and so energetic, and like also some of the people who are like about to finish their race, you can really feel like there was a lot of momentum at that point, and that's what gave me the zoomies to leave sort of the pacing group that I was at as we kind of rounded that corner and climbed up to Wellington is where I really felt a lot of energy because we were going into the city right on Bay Street. It was amazing there. That was a really awesome point, and I'd say for most people it's also before the breaking point around that like 27, 28 kilometer that got a lot of people.
Everyone's like, "Oh wow, this feels good. I'm doing good." They make that right turn. They're not part of the half marathon group, and then bing bang boom, things start to happen. But we'll dive into that in a little bit. Just a couple more questions, I guess, on the race itself and organization and stuff like that. I know on our episode previous to leading up to the race, we, kind of analyzed the aid stations and showed where things were at and everything like that. How, I guess, in general, was that executed on race day, and how were the aid stations flying through those?
Yeah, aid stations were A1. Honestly, I think like there were so many volunteers out and just so many cups of water to choose from, and people were like quick to get those out. Like coming through for part of the race, I was in a pacing group that was substantial enough. Now, mind you, I was at the 305 pace group, so like I don't know what was happening behind me, but there was always water. There were gels. They didn't run out of anything for myself. I know there were noons. I never had any of those, and they had people out raking, clearing up the cups. So honestly, thank you to all the volunteers for being out there. It does make a huge difference. It's like the only way that you can complete these is having those. And I would say water stations were spaced perfectly. They're like I was never like that thirsty throughout the race, but they were always coming up. Like you could rely on them every like 2.5, 3K, which is great. And the goo stations, like I did rely on some of the course fueling as well as my own fueling, and it was nice to have those on course as well with a variety of flavors, some caffeinated, some non-caffeinated. The only thing that I would say constructive feedback for like the fueling specifically, the fuel stations, is it would have been nice to know which gels I'm grabbing. So like to know like these are caffeinated, these are non-caffeinated. This is like even the flavors doesn't matter so much, but like knowing if the gels were caffeinated or not without having to like read them would have been cool to know. Like if they were yelling that or they had some sugar
Yeah,
and some
right at the
yeah,
beginning
or
or
like
something.
caffeinated is first, uncaffeinated is the second gels.
Mhm.
Something
Yeah.
like that. Yeah.
Yeah, no, and you said you did rely on some of those as well as your own?
Yeah, so the fueling that I took was immense. I did some gut training leading in, so I knew I could handle a lot of fuel, but I fueled more than I had planned for. So my plan going in was a gel 20 minutes before and then a gel right at the start, and then every 2 miles a gel. So that's 15 gels from like start to finish, basically. Something like that, 14 or 15. And I ended up consuming 16 gels, I believe.
What
All
the
in,
heck?
yeah, yeah. And 3 or 4 calves and the rest non calf.
Geez, that I find that's one of my biggest issues while running a race is the first 10, I don't feel like having any nutrition, and it's a trap. I always find myself on the back foot and chasing, and then I'm like, "Oh, I'll just delay this next one. I'll just delay this next one." And then I ended up not never getting enough. So I'm very curious but also happy that you ended up getting more in. How many grams per hour does that end up being?
So yeah, that would be like let's say it was 15 during the race with one pre. 15 during the race is just over 100 grams of carbs an hour, basically. So it was substantial. I think Andrew might even do more sometimes, but I think this was the reason that I didn't crack. Well, a lot of other people were cracking. Of course, I put a lot of training in there. That goes without saying, but I was ready to take in that much nutrition,
And
and
that
I
that
never
bikes
had yeah, like I trained specifically for it during my long runs on the weekends. I wasn't consuming that many gels, but I was making mixes like your pool water plus Kool-Aid or just like my homemade pretty much just regular sugar mix. I was taking in a lot of fuel during my long runs and it paid off because no gut discomfort allowed me to push through the end. Yeah.
It's very good to hear. That's nice. And I think another thing that's important is that, like, the hydration piece of it too, with the nutrition. So like the hydration plus the carbs is another big thing I find actually that's crept up on me twice this year. And again, like you said, you got trained throughout the whole summer, so you had no discomfort mixing in that liquid with the sugar and the gels. I found that kind of messed up with my GI a little bit during my last race, so that's good.
Yeah, I specifically didn't have any noon. So they were offering at I think at every water station, it was noon and water. I would take one or two water cups depending on how heavy that first water cup was. If it was a substantial pour, then I'd be good with one. If not, it was two. And a lot of the time, like near the end, throughout the race, actually, I was taking like on average 1.5 per stop, but never noon because I didn't train with noon. And I think during the Ottawa Marathon in 2024, I was taking in the noon, and I think that's what upset my stomach. So I decided no noon and just stuck with water. But I did make myself some electrolyte pills. I went to a pharmacy, just asked them for like unfilled pills that I just filled up with essentially our pool water electrolyte mix. And it
Yeah.
worked well.
Yeah. How many pills did you take throughout?
So I think I probably was able to take in five or six. I think I had about 8 or 9 on me, but they started to disintegrate. So after the 30-kilometer mark or so, I would like I would go to grab one and it was like half disintegrated. So my fingers would be all covered in salt and like the blue goo of the disintegrated capsule. That like yeah, I tried, but by the end there was nothing there. It was just all kind of this gross mangled mess.
Frig, that's nice. Yeah, when you sent me the pictures of you in the kitchen cooking it up, I was like, wow, that's way too nice. Definitely beat some of the strategic plays out there for the salt tabs, that's for sure. And like you said, if you thought the noon was part of your some of your GI, then get rid of it, and big positive for that one. So that's good.
For sure. But there were other question marks that I had going into race day, especially like how I would fare with the goos, because I didn't train with goos, and
Exactly.
a
That's what I was
lot of
scared of.
people a lot of people have sort of this prejudice, but also the knowledge for them that it doesn't work well with their racing when they're taking and consuming goos, and a lot of people do complain of GI. For me, it was fine. I needed the fuel, and I always, with the goos specifically, I would take them when I knew that there was water coming up, because the cis gels that I had, they're isotonic, and you can take them without needing water. They're liquidy enough, whereas the goo is really dense, we'll say, and doesn't have a ton of water. So it was nice to always be able to wash that down.
Exactly, without being stressed of looking for the next aid station. No, that's good.
Yeah, yeah. And in
Um,
terms of fueling, I had one Morton calf that I took right at the start, a ton of cis gels, and then two Morton non-calf, the 25 gram or like the
the
Morton
100.
100s. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And then the rest was all the cis non-calf
You
mix.
I tried the Morton 320 in a flask for my marathon, and I kind of used it in conjunction with the Mortons, but as like the liquid kind of to help me wash things down. And it actually, I think it helped because, of course, there was we talked about it. The aid stations were a little bit more spaced out, so I think it was good to get that carb and the water in me as well. But yeah, I mean, it depends on what types of gels you're having too, and I think the cis is a good addition to that.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what I trained with. So I knew that at the end of the day, I had just enough fuel to squeak by without needing the goo. But had I not had the goo, I think that wall would have stopped me, as it did many people. And I'm interested to dive into this and just like sort of like I of course I have a lot of thoughts, but it's different when you're having a conversation to really debunk and start to dive into like what went wrong for many people, and like how maybe that could be avoided in another marathon if people were to do another, because I've seen over Reddit, I've heard it in conversations, is for a lot of people they hit the wall, and so there's definitely strategies to avoid doing that. And even
Yeah, I
you
mean,
you and Andrew in the last two marathons you've run have also hit the wall.
Frey, I mean, I know I've been trying to get rid of this bunk of the wall. Every single marathon, I think I've hit some sort of a wall. It was never as hard, let's say, as my first one, and I've kept it. I've kept it at a pretty minimum a shamble rating, I guess you could say. But yeah, looking at, I guess we could jump into your splits unless you want to talk more about the race. But I mean, like just generally, I think you kept a pretty steady pace and minimal, if not no wall was hit on that day for you, unlike many people. Because we did, like we mentioned earlier, a lot of the BIM squad was out there. That's why I kind of had a lot of FOMO on that day, not joining, first of all, the race, and then secondly, not spectating in person. But yeah, a lot of people raced that day. Of course, a lot of people's first. So it was a great experience for many. And, just crossing that finish line is what matters. But oh man, the wall was hit.
Yeah, for sure. And just before diving into that, and you kind of touched on it, is there was a lot of the community there. Whether it was like people that we've grown up with, that we've trained with, that we know really well, who were at the event racing or cheering us on. Thank you for being a part of the Boys in Motion, of the Girls in Motion, and just like supporting us as we try to support you through your growth in sport. That's awesome. And then second, and I know Andrew mentioned to us this via text, is when he was at the expo, he got approached by many people thanking him for, the last episode that we did, chatting with him because of the pod. And that's just amazing. Meeting people who connected with us online really motivates us to create future content, to create future events, and just support this ecosystem that we love so much, that we've gained so much from. It really makes it a lot more meaningful, right? And it probably motivates us a little bit more to stay on that pony.
100%. You couldn't have said it any better. I mean, that's the reason why we do it. And of course, those races are only just as fun as the people that do it around you. And, the before and the after and all that fun stuff is, the reason why we race. So it's perfect.
Yeah, exactly. So why don't we switch gears, dive into my race specifically? We've been about like 20-25 minutes or so. So yeah, we can dive in. Ask me anything you want. I'll be as blunt, transparent as you need, because yeah, I think I've got new goals now that.
Greg, I like that. I mean, to start, just a quick look at the overview is I realized, I don't know, were you wearing your heart rate strap? Because that heart rate was real low, first of all. Means you could have went a little harder, right?
Yeah, for sure the heart rate is a lie. Let me just see, what does it say my average heart rate is? Like 146?
Yeah, 146. And like I'm looking at the splits and you're in the 30s, the 40s. I'm like, what the heck is this guy doing?
Yeah, so definitely the heart rate was a lie. I don't know if it ever really got it. I had my watch on loose enough so I didn't lose any feeling in my hand, and I actually forgot to put my heart rate strap on in the moment that I was checking like through the like bag check, and I'm so glad that I did. I think I might not race with my heart rate monitor anymore for a race like that. Just mentally not having that
Yeah,
information allowed me to run more on feel, more
feel.
on paces, rather than, if I had looked down at a certain moment and seen my heart rate over 180. Usually I like to be in that like 176 to 179. If I had seen that heart rate over 180, I might have held myself
Stress.
back and gotten
Yeah.
stressed that I'm burning matches early. Didn't have any of that. And even like 5, 10, 15 kilometers into the race, I was joking with Andrew like, "Oh, look at me. I'm, 138, feeling really good. This is a good long run right now." So
That's the
yeah.
first thing I seen when I looked at your stats. I was like, what the heck? This guy's going pogey mode on us. He's been on the bike too long, haven't been training for marathon enough. But yeah, no, that I think I might do that same play because yeah, I just like you said, I kind of get stressed with that heart rate number. I don't have it on my main screen when I'm racing, but I always tend to, click back at it when there's some harder efforts. I actually make a conscious choice to look at it, and it kind of overall I think increases that stress level. When you don't need it, you just need to run by feel.
For sure. So yeah, that was a good learning from the race, is the heart rate monitor and like totally accurate heart rate isn't something that's necessary for me to succeed in a race. Who knows? Would I have done better if I saw heart rate? I don't know. But I do feel like mentally throughout the race, it was better not having heart rate. But yeah,
Yeah.
so
and
just
and I mean,
yeah,
yeah, I'm digging into your splits here, and of course I'm being very picky because I can't really pick anything very wrong out of this race, of course. But like, you stayed very consistent at the between that really 420 to 423 minutes per kilometer through the first half. I think that I've actually looked at a lot of the BIM folks splits going through this race, just curious. And it seems like the 21K mark, a lot of people had a very fast K. I don't know if it was downhill, but I think it was mostly GPS related. So I'm kind of ignoring that split as an outlier, as a lot of people had that weird outlier. But I mean, still, going through 28, 29, 30, you're still in that 420 to 425 range. And I mean, you didn't really budge from there. So I don't have much criticism. How
No,
did you feel, I guess?
yeah. So like, yeah, from a split perspective, we can dive into that. So I think the early part of the race, I was with the 305 pace bunny, Andrew, until about the 20K mark. As we turned, as the 21st kilometer started, and we turned up bay. That's after dipping under the gardener and like just hearing the crowd, and I know we're coming up to the half marathon leaving us, and I knew like my mom was going to be there. I knew there was family at other parts coming soon. So I was like, let me get a little bit ahead of this group, make sure that the people who came to support me can actually see me as well. I was feeling good like smashing up that hill a little bit. So that was like right where I kind of turned it on and was like, this is my race. Let's start to take control. And Andrew had paced me and that group so well up into that point. I had a little bit, I think we were just under pace, maybe like 20, 30 seconds under pace, which was perfect because I needed every second. So yeah, we came through that first half in about like 32 minutes or so, something like that. I don't know exactly, but it was close. And yeah, and from there we got into sort of like going up the river where there's like that out and back before you go over the bridge, and that was just like a very exciting point of the race as well. It was like close quarters and lots of
Yeah,
people cheering.
I was gonna say a lot of people on that back and forth, a little bit less exciting for the spectators, unless it was different this year. But I mean, the I think with the close quarters and you're kind of ducking and weaving through people made it go by quicker. I think too, right through that 25, 27K mark.
For sure. And like taking a step back, the start was like it was electric. You're in the city on Young is actually far tighter than University where the race started in years prior.
That's true. It looked the pictures looked like it was cooler and like more buildings and more ads on the sides. Like it made it a little bit look more like a New York vibe.
Yeah, for sure. I would definitely give it that. And now it was tough to get into your corral. I know a lot of people were panicking. Saw a lot of people in the alleyways taking pre-race peas and that sort of thing. It was maybe a little bit more chaotic than it being in like the widespread boulevard that is University. But it made for a great start. It was intense, so much energy, and you're sort of running uphill, but it doesn't feel like it because you're weaving and having fun. Turning onto Bloor, there were so many people, and it's a pretty wide street, but it was just awesome racing, and you're starting to go a little bit downhill, and then Bathurst is just fast, right? And it we got to what like by when is that? Like the 8 kilometer mark is when you actually get onto Lakeshore, but everything before then, the streets were lined with people, and it was just I was not tired at all. It just felt like still in that warm up mode, right?
Yeah, you
Which is what
feel
you
you
want.
feel like you're excited. You feel ecstatic. Yeah.
Yeah. And coming across that first part of Lakeshore is where like it started to just become business, right? Like you were just executing your race plan, sticking with the pace bunny, sticking with whatever, fueling you had to do. But then it became a battle after you turned away from the finish line going through that half marathon point. Yeah. That was it was a cool part of the race to get through to the halfway mark.
Yeah, that's iconic. I mean, I remember doing it, and yeah, I felt the same way. It was like you said, it got to business. Then you're like, okay, this is real. You turn after that 21K, it's like, okay, this is not as fun anymore. Now we're getting into the nitty gritty of it, and the reason why you train, right, is you train for those late miles, and you train for to keep that pace for as long as you possibly can.
Yeah, exactly. So just kind of reminding myself. So you kind of go down Wellington a little bit, you hit Cork Town, which is where that out and back is, and that's where it felt like, okay, now it's a solo effort. Now I've got to rely on myself. The rest was like fun in a group. For myself, I split off, and I think for a lot of people, it's a little bit of a race of attrition, the marathon. So at a certain point, it does just become you against the miles. And around the 25 kilometer mark is where that like the buzz of the main city center kind of wore off, and then it was boom, back to business. You're just executing. And now, where for a lot of people the race started to get hard was the 27th kilometer. And what's there? It's that overpass over the Don River that we talked about during the pre race warm up podcast. And this is where so many people had that first encounter of the dreaded wall, of the place where you started to say, what the hell am I doing? I can't do this for another 14K.
That's the zombie mode hill. Yeah.
Yeah. So for myself, I was still feeling very strong at this point. I sagged the climb a tiny bit. I'm looking at my pace. My pace went like it was still under 5 minutes at the slowest part of that hill, but it was hovering around there. But my grade adjusted pace was still fairly quick at like a 4:13. So I still like kept it quick and then just like carried the downhill. And then after the downhill, just kind of kept moving. Honestly, it was like I don't even remember that part of the race until we got back towards the beaches, like near Woodbine Beach. On the way out, I don't really remember much of that at all.
Did you, when you were coming, now I'm thinking about, our pre-race episode, when you were coming through off of Lakeshore the other way and back up into that subdivision, how were the crowds? How did you feel then? I know I was a little bit more in shambles then.
Yes. So I would say after Woodbine Beach is where the race really started to get hard. So I'm looking at what kilometer mark this is. This is at about the 31 kilometer mark. This is where the race started to get difficult, where it started to become, like you start negotiating with yourself about being able to maintain pace. How much can you slow down? How many people can you catch in the next 5 minutes? Those sorts of games started to be played around this mark. It's also the spot where as you curve away from the beaches and up to, what is that, Queen maybe? Yeah, up to Queen again. You start getting a little more elevation because as you make your way to that turnaround point, it's uphill steadily. And that was a tough part of the race, but luckily when you got to Queen Street, it was busy. And so there were a lot of people to hold you accountable, and there was still a relatively solid stream of people at my pace that I was able to like kind of work off of to get myself to that turnaround point.
Yeah, nice. That's great to hear. I know that's usually a struggle fest. And if you have that little bit of that group, like you said, you're playing those mental games, it definitely helps and keeps your mind busy. I think then, okay, I'm at this kilometer, this is getting hard. You're kind of trying to distract yourself in any way possible, and you're trying to stay on target as well. I'm just curious, did you have a pace band on your arm, or like how did you look at your splits, I guess, going through the race and especially in the late game?
Yeah, so luckily like I had Andrew in the 305 pace group and there was a bunch of us together. And so I didn't have like pace bands. I knew I needed to be at 7:03 miles, which I was getting reminders of because every other mile I was going for my gels. So I was using that sort of general.
And you switched
guide.
to miles?
And then I had kilometers showing while I was running, but then I got reminders every mile on my mile split. So that was really good. And I like using miles for a situation like that because I don't train in miles, but then seeing the like average mile is nice to see, and it's a little longer than a kilometer, so it kind of sucks up some of that variance that you have in kilometers. But yeah, so I didn't have a pace band, and I knew as soon as I took off from that group, like Andrew's going to be going for the 305, so as long as I'm ahead, then I'm ahead of time, which was good. But yeah, like I said, the Queen Street had a lot of energy. And right around that turnaround felt good, and there was a descent. And so that kind of leaves us to, let me see, like the 35th kilometer was a 4:17 pace. And I was starting to really feel tired, but just like exhaustion tired, not bonking, like out of energy, but just yeah, was starting to realize that it was getting very, very difficult.
Yeah, which makes sense. And then now you're coming back down Queen, making your way back to the city. I remember starting to see the CN Tower come alive again, and seeing the crowds pop up again. So like, bring us through that final 5K. I see you dipped slightly in pace again. Like I'm saying, I'm being a little picky here, but going from a 425 per kilometer down to a 433, so which is not too crazy of a dip of a bonk, let's call it. But yeah, bring me through the last five, and of course the last stretch there coming up Bay Street.
Yeah, so I'm going to reframe it from the last five to the last seven. So the last seven started right at Woodbine Beach, right as I got back onto Lakeshore. And this is where I started struggling to keep the like 420 pace, which I was basically at before this, like an average of 420 pace. And so through kilometer 36, 37, all the way to kilometer 39, which at the start of kilometer 40 is basically where you go over that bridge again. Which I knew was going to be a struggle, but then I realized like, okay, there's not much left and the energy of the city is coming. So for me, the toughest part of the race was going down, like back towards Toronto on Waterfront between Woodbine and then that overpass of the Don River. It's a 4 kilometer stretch, and there my average was probably about 430, so about 10 seconds over pace. That was tough. I was trying to like hang on to a runner in front of me. Like if somebody came around me, I would try to hang on to them as long as I could. And I was also passing more people than were passing me, so it was also motivating to like catch a new person, sit in their draft 2 seconds, keep moving, that sort of thing. So definitely that's where the mental battles started. And then I got over that. Then I started heading over that bridge, brought the pace down a little, hit again like just under 5 minutes per kilometer in terms of like actual pace. Grade adjusted. It was of course a little bit faster coming up that hill. And then I was close to the finish line.
I mean, yeah, really. They say, what do they say? I think the first 32 is your warm up. The first 32 is the warm up. I think the next five is the race, and then the final two is just the vibes and the crowd. And they say the point two at the end is just your heart. So I mean, the last mile or so, I always remember pretty. Pretty fondly at every race is that last mile. You're in the middle of kind of pushing, but you're not going that fast, but you feel that you're going that fast, and then the crowd just brings you home. So I could imagine the feelings there, and being happy to be done.
For sure. So speaking about crowds, as I came down off the Don River Bridge overpass, right where it's like super hard, but I knew like coming off that bridge, you've got speed in your legs because you got that decline, and you're about 2.5K away from being done. Chris Carter from the Coffee Trotters is sitting there with a sign. And that was just the perfect person to be sitting there. I was not expecting him whatsoever. He's there with the Coffee Cruisers logo on a thing, just so recognizable, a familiar face. And that was like, okay, we're going. Now's the time to smash.
That's
So thank you,
sick.
Chris, for coming out
Did
and
he did
watching.
he
It
recognize
was
you?
pretty sweet. Oh, for sure. Yeah, he asked me where Tammy was. I couldn't muster up any words, but I just kind of pointed behind, and I was off. I was off.
Yeah, the classic. Don't know what to say. Just friggin' thumbs up and get fired up. That's great.
Yeah, so I was pretty fired up at that, and I'll be honest, coming off that bridge down Eastern, it was longer than I remember it being coming back to Bay, but that's okay because like the pace was back on. I was sort of like trying to sprint as much as I could, sort of like in and out, hovering the pace. It was like sprint, oh you're dying, sprint, oh you're dying kind of thing. But as I turned that corner, I saw my mum for the second time as I was kind of coming up and making that turn off Wellington up to Bay. And then, like you say, from there, I think it was maybe like it's less than a kilometer. It's maybe like 700 meters, 800 meters. It's a steady uphill, but there's so many people. The crowd was so energetic. It was the best part of the race, and yeah, you just know you're close to that finish line. So boom, cross, and yeah, it was awesome. And heard the announcement of my name. Just, yeah, total vibes. It was great.
Of course, that's amazing. And yeah, that Toronto Waterfront finish, even the spring marathon, they're a little cheeky with their marathon finishes with the uphills, but I mean, the crowd takes your legs home and through that finish line. So yeah, you probably felt amazing crossing that finish line and, get that medal on your neck. And in the BIM singlet too. I saw a lot of people sporting the BIM singlet, so that was amazing to see.
Yeah, you had Mike, myself, and Mark. We're all sporting the BIM singlet, which was awesome.
Right, yeah. I mean, that's great. Let's do a couple shout outs here. A couple BIM, I think other BIM participants that did the marathon. Go right ahead, and then we'll head on to the recovery.
Yeah, so key people. I posted a picture with all of these people. We spent kind of a lot of time training as well. So of course, myself, Pete, my dad, finished just sub 5, an incredible race from him, a PR. He said it's his last marathon. We'll see if that's actually true. I think he might have another one to run. The next to cross the finish line of our group was Andrew, of course, our co-host of the Boys in Motion pod. He finished around 3:08 maybe after pacing the 3:05 group until the 35-kilometer mark or so, and then he just said let it rip because he was suffering from some gut issues. The next to cross was Mark. He was sub 4, maybe around the 3:50 mark. Also Jansen Batista, he beat Mark. He passed him in like the last 1,000 meters or so, in that last kilometer. Just tapped him on his shoulder, said
That is
and just
savage. I didn't
ahead.
know that. That's
Yeah.
freaky. He must be itching for another one. I know he was texting me and he's
Oh, for sure.
freaking out.
Yeah. So a good battle between Mark and Jansen. Next to pass the line was Mike. I think I don't know his exact finish time, but a good effort from him. Some of the race pictures, he was in a sufferfest. I know everybody was talking about the walk runs that he was doing, or that they were all doing, and he was in that group. And then Kennedy with a super successful time. She was the next to cross, and Kennedy, people familiar with the pod, we interviewed her pre and post around the bay, so she's now a marathoner. And actually, Mark, Kennedy, Mike, and the last person in our group, Adam, are all first time marathoners, so they all are now officially, wearing that crown. And Adam finished the slugfest. He crossed that line with a big smile on his face. But yeah, it was a tough day out there for him. He was loving it, and I think he cherished every moment. It was just incredible to see him cross that finish line, especially with, like, I think out of everybody, he has had the toughest training block to accomplish. He had a nail in his foot, which took him out for the full month of August, which is kind of that core training time. So incredible to see him pass that
Yeah,
42.2 in that
that's
area.
wild. And I mean, like, just knowing, from past experiences and, other community members that just have that grit in them is just as hard, if not harder. Staying out there for 5+ hours, almost double the time you've been out there is a whole other game, not only physically, but mentally, even though it's, not as quick, of course, it's just still that grit, that grind, and just the not giving up is just wild to me. I love it.
Yeah, and I do love the Toronto racecourse. If you had other people running out there, you were bound to run into
That's
them
true.
once or twice on
Yeah.
that racecourse because you're doing so many kind of like out and back type of things. So it was awesome. Like I saw Mark, I saw Mike on the racecourse. I don't know if I saw Kennedy, but I was looking for her. And the best encounter that I had was I was turning up bay towards the finish line, and about 100 meters before turning up and like seeing the finish line, I pass Adam, who's just at the 21-kilometer mark. And that just goes to show you the kind of determination that it takes to finish a marathon. Is like he was out there suffering. Like I was coming to the finish line, obviously hurting a lot, but he was just going out for that whole Eastern trip, and he still had a lot more time to suffer. So to everybody, no matter what time you finished, congratulations are in order because it's just an amazing feat.
Again, that's what I find amazing. No matter what, time, shape, size, whatever you want to do. Even I seen some crazy outfits. Some people dressed in construction gear. I saw a dinosaur. The TTC was out there. The Go Train. Slinky was out there. Everyone just having fun, enjoying the day. So congrats to all.
Oh yeah, there was a guy in hockey
Oh
who
yeah,
was
that's
the
freaky.
yeah. So cool to see that. Yeah. So overall, it was a great day. Luckily, the weather held out. It started pouring in the early afternoon around like 3 o'clock or so. So once everybody had finished the run, then the skies opened up and it was pouring.
So really perfect timing for that rain to start when everyone was done. So what were you doing? Did you hang out with the crew a little bit after? How does that immediate recovery look like, and hydration, let's call it, maybe hydration and food, and then of course the next days, and we're recording this the day after. So how does your next day and even week is it look like for after a marathon?
Yeah, great question. So immediately as I crossed the finish line, I was sort of like, there's actually a photo of me. I've got like my tongue out, like just like, bah, so exhausted. And then somebody with like a microphone and a camera came up. They're like, one word to describe how the marathoner, how you feeling right now? And all I could muster up was just do it. So Nike, I'd like my sponsorship dollars.
I
That was
wonder
pretty
where
cool.
that's going to pop up.
I don't know, but he asked for one word. All I could do was a
For
cricket slogan.
the,
So
the biggest
that was eating
friggin'
at me.
sports company in the world, night.
Yeah, that was eating at
You
me
couldn't have
after
said
that.
boys in motion
Um,
or something, eh?
no, seriously, I shoulda, I shoulda. But the vapor flies got
Or
me through
join
the
the
day,
motion.
and I loved the
Yeah,
shoes.
exactly.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
join the motion. But
how did
honestly,
you find
the
the shoes?
the vapor
Yeah.
flies were great. Vapor flies were great. Loved them. Yeah, yeah,
No
yeah, yeah.
blisters, no issues?
None
Frig.
whatsoever. Like I had only done 3 kilometers at pace in those
That's
shoes before
that's
this
freaky.
race, and they were perfect. I actually have two pairs of the same size. I think I'm gonna keep them
Frig.
both. Well, like of course I'm gonna keep the ones that I ran in, but I might keep this other pair just as the reserve race one
Yeah.
because they were
I mean,
ideal.
I really enjoyed mine as well. It's just I don't know if it was the fact of the downhill. I don't want to go too far into my analysis, but I had a big heel blister on my left foot, and maybe it was the way I tied it, but I did really enjoy the shoe. It was just that blister kind of messed me up at the end, but yeah, I'm curious to see if a little bit of tweaks with the tightness of the shoe, or even the race surface. I know my race was mostly gravel, so maybe that made a big difference too. But yeah, I like the response of the shoe, and how it felt though, for sure.
I agree. I think it's a great shoe, and yeah, I think probably like you say, a combination of downhill, how you tied them, and yeah, like the downhill, you're hitting your heel a lot. And I was really focusing on yeah, like running quite on the forefoot, just like pushing off as much as I could. But yeah, overall shoes were good. The yeah, body held up. The outfit that I had on was perfect, no chafe, nothing like that. So yeah, cross the finish line. Bad interview. 3 seconds later, but a lifetime of embarrassment on that one. Grabbed a ton of water and then I started chucking back the noons. I probably had 3 or 4 cups of water followed by two of noon, and I needed that hydration at the end. So that was good. And then as I turned to like the big Nathan Phillips Square area, I saw an Athletic Brewing Company tent, and the only thing I did was I went and got myself a free NA IPA, and then yeah, went to find Andy. So pretty good, pretty good. And then we of course went out for food as a gang. We went to Waterworks, which is a like a kind of upper scaled kind of like it's an upper scale type of food court where they have a bar and they have like
Oh
bars
yeah,
and
yeah,
restaurants and that sort of thing, and that was great. I had ramen and everybody had
yeah. That's a
whatever they wanted,
good
from
that's a good
Italian
decision.
to Indian to everything.
Yeah, and I find the ending of that race very well organized, as in like there's a lot of room. It's not really a confined space. Sometimes the corrals are very weird, or there's a very weird lead up with fencing. I found that one was pretty easily accessible, let's call it, for family and friends to join in and hang out. And of course, you're in downtown Toronto, so after that, you could just go do whatever. So
Yeah, exactly. And we actually took city bikes from Nathan Phillips down Queen, which was awesome. And we were kind of like lounging in the grass between like when runners we knew were coming through the finish, and then we'd go watch them sort of in that S bend near the end. And that was, yeah, perfect, well organized. I'll be honest, when I crossed the finish line of my first marathon, I said never again. As I crossed the line for this marathon, I said I can't wait for the next one. Yeah, so I'm fired up. I hope everybody listening is also fired up. Let's go. I think that's a good place to wrap it on our Toronto Waterfront 2025 Marathon Weekend recap. Huge congrats to everyone who ran, volunteered, or came out to support, and a massive thank you for everyone who came up to say hi. Meeting listeners in person was unreal.